I have been writing 2,000 words a day for 84 days, and that is insane because throughout most of my writing career I aim for 2,000 words. I have never reached a streak this high. I gave an update when I reached 56 days, which is in a different video. I will link it. It was very enlightening, and one of the cons I mentioned about doing a challenge like that is the fact that afterwards I found it impossible to stop because it was so empowering and addicting in a way that when I finally had like the freedom or permission to no longer write, I found that I didn't want to, and in fact it felt like there was something missing about my day. I felt incomplete. I felt like I couldn't go on with my life or relax or do something else until I had written 2,000 words. I don't know if this is healthy. I don't know if it's sustainable, but since I am in the middle of a streak, I kind of don't want to lose it. In fact, I might aim for 100 days, which is insane because my original goal was, first of all, to just get to 7 days, and then to get to 30 days, and then 50, and now I am aiming for 100. So I'm at 84. There's 16 days left before I reach 100, and it has been a very good experience. So I highly recommend you do it. Watch my other video for some inspiration as well as what I learned. This video, however, is going to be about my revisions process because now that I finished drafting the book that I talked about in my other video where I wrote 2,000 words every day for 56 days, I will be going back to that book in order to revise it. I wanted to make this video as a way to remind myself of what I usually do because it feels as if every book that I write is the first book that I've ever written. It almost feels like I forget every single thing about writing a book every time I start a new project. My name is Van and I am an author and librarian. My books include Girl Giant and the Monkey King for middle grade readers as well as the upcoming NTQ's Golden Claws Nail Salon. I also write books for adults, the most notable one being Monstrous Mrs. Mai, which is an adult historical fantasy. My videos are all about writing, self-improvement, and productivity, just living a wholesome life. So if that is your jam, please give me a like and subscribe. And we're gonna get into the video. I was reading this book and it talks about how you teach what you need to learn yourself. So that's what this video is about, kind of just reminding myself that no matter how anxious I feel about a book and no matter how sad or stressed I am about the book, I have been through this before. I know what to do. There is a step-by-step process, which I will talk about, and just reminding myself of these things will remind my feelings or my soul or the deep critic that lives inside of me that I've done this before and I know what I'm doing, and just because I feel a certain way about a book doesn't mean that it's true, that no matter how bad a draft is, it can always be revised and it can always be edited. Writing is not a performance art. Stories are written in layers. I can revise this book as often as it takes in order to get it into good enough shape to send out to the world, and that gives me comfort knowing that there is a revisions process and there are steps that I can follow to make this better. It's not impossible. It's not a fantasy, like I can do this, I've done it before. If I keep saying that, if I keep reminding myself of that, maybe I will feel so much better about myself. By the way, if you're wondering what room I'm in, I'm actually in a library and this is an empty meeting room. That's why there are all these chairs, and I just had a free moment during my break to record this video. So that's where I'm at, and I'm going to get into my revisions process now. The first step for me is to find a time to sit down and actually read through the book from start to finish. I try to read the book in one sitting. It might sound kind of impossible and very intense because it takes like 4 to 5 hours for me to read a novel length that's about 100,000 words. Finding a day where I can just read through the book in one sitting used to be a lot easier before I had my kid, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible. It's just now I might have to split this into 1 to 3 days. As long as I read it with enough time to keep the story in my brain, that's good enough. When I'm sitting down to read this draft from beginning to end, I am going to resist changing anything. I'm not gonna even have my keyboard with me. If I feel like I have to print out the book, I will, but I just don't want to waste paper. But the idea is to just read it and to absorb what you wrote, because usually when I'm drafting, I exist in this sort of fever dream where I don't really know what I wrote down. Goal is to just get it out as fast as possible, which is what I did. So right now, reading it is just understanding what I wrote and understanding what I was trying to say with the story. And so while I'm reading it, I will create a document with a table with 3 columns. The first column being existing draft outline, which is literally what it says. I'm going to write down and summarize exactly what is in the book, chapter by chapter. And this, again, is to just get a complete idea of what I wrote, because I probably have no idea at this point what I wrote, like as if somebody broke into my computer and my brain and wrote this entire story that I have no control over. So first column column is existing draft outline. The second column should be notes. As I am resisting trying to change anything in my book while I'm reading it, I will instead write down notes that I know I will need to address. Inconsistent characters, plot hole here, that sort of thing. These are very quick things that I will write down just so that I will remember to come back and address them, but I'm not going to try to solve all of my problems here. It's just like any little simple notes that I want to come back to. The third column is going to be called revisions, but I'm not going to write anything in the revisions column until I'm done reading the book, because sometimes I think I'm going to revise something in a certain way and then I'll get to the end of the book and realize that I've already addressed it or I was trying to do something else with it. That doesn't mean that you have to resist writing anything in this revisions. If you know, then you know, but I'm going to avoid writing anything in the revisions column while I'm reading because that saves me on time and energy and work. Right now, the idea is to just understand what past me was trying to say so that future me can solve my problems. After I finish reading, I will take about 1 to 2 days to process the story. And yes, usually it takes 1 to 2 days. There's no way to rush this because no matter what, no matter where I am in the writing process or the publishing process, I always have to go through a grieving period with each draft. And I'm serious about the grieving period. It's literally like the 5 steps of grief where you go through depression and you argue with yourself and you make these deals with yourself. Like, what if I just did this? Or what if I did that? Or whatever. I can't skip this process. The only way out is through. Once I take 1 or 2 days to process this, then I can finally move on to addressing the revisions column that I was trying to avoid in the first few steps. Usually by now, I will probably have a good idea of how I want to change the book, and using my notes and then the existing draft outline, write out the revisions that I want to create that last column, or I can create another column and call it revised outline, and that is where I might take chunks of the original outline or I just change it completely. It's different with every book, and I will know as soon as I start really diving into the edits of this novel. I treat my revisions for myself as an edit letter, and what I do first is I break it down into big tasks and then to small tasks. And of course, depending on the story, what I will try to do is tackle the big tasks first, because the little tasks sometimes will kind of solve themselves once you solve the bigger issues. And this makes it sound so easy, but this part of the process is actually probably the hardest part. Addressing all of these issues, all these plot holes and character inconsistencies and themes and everything that makes the story stronger. Once I'm done with all of these revisions, I will actually read through the book one time to make sure that everything makes sense and to try to fix anything that I could in the moment. And then I will set the book aside for about 2 weeks. Not quite as long as when I finished drafting it, but just enough time for my brain to rest and to come back to the book with fresh eyes. Because trust me, once you're done with revisions, you probably don't want to work on this book for a long time. I'll set it aside for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then guess what? We do that all over again. And I mean, literally, once again, we will sit down and read the book from start to finish, create another document with a table with an existing draft outline, notes, and revisions. And then you do that again and again. And again, until you're so sick of the book, until the words no longer have any meaning. And when you cannot possibly see any problems that you are able to fix, that's when it's time to send to a beta reader or a trusted person that you know will read your book and give you honest, constructive feedback. I'm lucky enough to have some author friends who are willing to read the book and tell me everything that's wrong with it in a nice way that will be constructive and will help improve my career and my book. And it's a painful process, but you have to do it. You have to. This is how you become better writers. And I will talk about that in more detail when I get to that process, but I'm excited to dive into revisions soon. I might vlog about it as I'm going through it, but I might just want to focus on my revisions. But I hope this was helpful to you in some way. I will give an update on when I am done with revisions to see if this process was successful once again. I always have this like fear and anxiety, despite having written books before, that I'm never going to be able to write another book. I get this imposter syndrome. Was that really me, the person who wrote all those books in the past that, you know, can still do it again in the future? And I just have a lot of anxiety whenever I go back to my book and read it and revise it or look at it. And that's what creating art is about. I understand that there's an anxiety within it, but I still struggle with it. But talking about this kind of helps a little bit to remind me that I have a little bit of an idea of what I'm doing. So I hope this helped you in some way, and not to bring you guys down, but I am going to charge into doing that in the next few days. I appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoyed my anxious and chaotic energy, I also have a newsletter that I am trying to publish every month. It talks a lot about my author updates, librarian updates, writerly updates, and all of my favorite things that I'm reading or watching. If you sign up for that, you also get a short story. It's called Boy Giant and the Search for the Missing Manuscript, which is a prequel to my Girl Giant and the Monkey King series. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.